Hey guys, today I've got a new phone, the Galaxy A34 5G, and I'm going to do a short little review of it. I've used this phone for probably about 3 weeks now, and I really like it. I got it for $200 used, but usually you can get it for like $350 in the States. Granted, you have to buy it through Amazon, through like a third party or something, or a different website, because Samsung doesn't sell this in the US market. And none of the carriers actually supply it. But the thing that made me really want to get this phone was that it seemed like it was equal to, if not better than, the Galaxy A54, which cost $500. And I really liked the matte back iridescent coating. So I just wanted to get it in and try it out. The main things that looked cool to me is that it had dual speakers and it had an OLED screen. And of course, it's a Samsung phone, which are usually pretty expensive. They come with a premium. So this one, like I said, I got for $200 and I've really enjoyed it. So let's just talk about the outside real quick. This has a USB-C charging port, which supports 25-watt wired charging. There is a down-firing speaker, and that's part of a stereo speaker system. That's a hybrid stereo speaker system. So one in the top, one in the bottom. Then you have microphones on the top and bottom. You have the SIM card tray, which has expandable memory option as well for up to 1 terabyte. And then on the sides here, you have a power button and the volume up and volume down. And of course, on the back, you have 3 cameras. You've got the ultra wide camera, the main camera, which has optical image stabilization. And then I think the final one's a depth sensor. Can't remember off the top of my head, but like most phones, this third camera is kind of trash. So I'm not a big fan of that. Anyways, let's power it on and get a look at the screen and the software. So like I said before, the screen is an OLED and I really like it. It's got punchy colors as you'd expect from Samsung. And as I go through the phone, I want to just talk about some of the software things that I've noticed. So this phone has an under-screen fingerprint reader and face unlock. So one thing that kind of drives me crazy about this software is that if I unlock it with my face, like I just did, and then I put my finger where the thumbprint is, then it'll show up like this editing screen, and then it's kind of annoying to get out of. I wish they didn't do that. I know you can enable the option so when you unlock it, it auto goes to your home screen, but I personally like seeing my notifications, being able to just turn it on, maybe see the weather, depending on how you have it set up. So that's my first gripe with the software, but I'll start talking about another thing that I actually really like about the software. It's the shelf. It has this cool feature where you can have your clipboard and it actually lasts for a decent amount of time. I know you can do a clipboard on Gboard, but that times out after an hour. So I personally love this feature. I use something similar on my PC called Ditto, which lets me keep track of things that I've copied and pasted in the past and sticky them and do all sorts of cool stuff. Another thing that I really like about this phone versus other Samsung phones, at least in the US market, is that it does support OEM unlocking, which enables you to root. So I always like rooting my phones. I don't know why really. Well, the main reason is with Google's Monet, there is a app called Repainter that allows you to set all of your like primary, secondary colors and all that stuff. So instead of having a grayish background or a bluish background based on your wallpaper, you can set it to whatever you want. And I really like a full OLED background, so most of the screen is just off. Along with the screen, one thing that I really enjoy is the stereo speaker setup. It's actually really loud and it sounds pretty full. I did buy a used unit and sometimes it sounds like the speaker is a little like blown out. It gets a little scratchy. So I don't know if that's the unit that I bought or just how this phone performs, but it sounds a lot better than the Galaxy A54 that I bought on Facebook Marketplace. Well, maybe not a lot better, but it gets louder and it's equally as full. The other thing about this phone that I actually enjoy is the camera setup. Now, you got to keep in mind, this is a $200 phone. I know I keep saying that, but you got to expect that with this camera. So for $200, the viewfinder looks pretty bad. But when you actually go and look at the pictures after you've taken them, Samsung does some good processing. And to me, I actually prefer this phone's camera to the A54. So that's something to keep in mind. I'll show some samples here so you can see what I'm talking about. Here's an ultra wide video. Go outside. Pretty nice, I guess. Oh, really easy to get your fingers in there. Here's a selfie video. Not too bad. All right, another thing that is huge for this phone is actually the battery. You can see here I have 14 hours and 7 minutes of screen on time, which is absurd. This thing just goes and goes and goes all day. And as I said, it supports 25-watt charging through a cable. And while that's not super fast, not like, a Xiaomi or a lot of the phones that support 45, 68, whatever you want, it is fast enough considering the size of this battery that if I plug in for 10, 15 minutes, I feel like I can go for a good amount of time. And I do work at home, so realistically I can plug in whenever I want, but I still really value good battery life, especially for when I travel and things like that. So I really enjoy that on this phone. Let's talk about the performance of this phone. This is running the Dimensity 1080 GPU, and it works really well, honestly. It's a very low power chip, so it just sucks energy very lightly, as you saw in AccuBattery, and it just keeps it going. I also have the version with 8 gigs of RAM, I believe, which is enough that when you're switching between apps, it seems relatively quick. Performance-wise, this phone is pretty good. I do notice that sometimes it'll lag a little bit, and this has a 120 hertz screen, and honestly, sometimes I feel like, it looks a lot more laggy than even a 60 hertz screen, but that's kind of what you get when you have a 1080p screen and a lower end processor. So I don't really mind it all that much. And once an app is actually open, it works really well. I'll show you here with a game. I've got Alien Isolation loaded up, and this is a game that was first on consoles and PC, so it's a really demanding game, and I like it more than Genshin Impact. Not really a big fan of the gacha games, so I like playing this one. I'm gonna wait for this to get loaded up, and then I'll show you a little bit of what it's like to actually play it. All right, I've got the game loaded up. Let's just walk around a little bit. There is a way to see the performance stats on Samsung phones using an application called GoodLock, and I did that in the past before I rooted, and while I was playing this game, it was locked at 30, but I never saw it dip below 30, so the performance on this phone is really good. Again, considering the price, like you can play pretty much whatever you want. If you can run this game, you can run almost anything, right? So for just playing games, watching movies, if you're gonna get this for your parent or your grandparent, it's gonna run awesome. I've liked it a lot. And for media consumption, like I said, it's got that punchy Samsung OLED, that's got those dual stereo speakers, and it just works really well. And if you're scared in the US that it might not work well with your carrier, I'd recommend you look at your bands and see if they're supported by your carrier. For this phone, it supports the same bands as the Galaxy A54 on T-Mobile, so I get as good of service as I did with the A54 and the same service I get with my Google Pixel, so can't really complain there. Now, what this phone is missing that I think most flagships have is the haptics are kind of weak, a little bit mushy. and the camera's not that good. Honestly, to me, that's pretty much all this is missing. It does have this little nipple drop thing, which, you know, most flagships, actually no flagships have that anymore that I'm aware of. But considering the size of the screen and the screen to body ratio, it doesn't really bother me at all. It just kind of melts away. I'd rather have this than something like the Dynamic Island, personally. So overall, I would highly recommend this phone, especially if you're looking at the Galaxy A54 and you're a Samsung fan. If you're not a Samsung fan, then, you know, maybe look at some Xiaomi's or some of the other phones. But for Samsung, I think it makes absolutely no sense to buy the A54 unless your carrier doesn't support it. And if you're not in the States or Canada, then definitely get this phone over the A54. I've got this and the A54, and I much prefer this phone. The only caveat is that the A54 is a little bit smaller, but I don't know, when I was using it in my hand, it didn't make that big of a difference, and this looks a lot more interesting than the glossy glossy is non-matte. The glossy A54. Yeah, so that's my review. I hope you liked it. If you did, please drop a like, give me a subscription, or don't, you know, whatever. Leave a comment if you have any questions, and I'll try and answer them to the best of my ability. Thanks, guys. See you on the next one.